If you're looking to pass the Florida Civic Literacy Exam or the Civics EOC, you have come to the right place. My name is Jack and I am a civics teacher in the state of Florida. And without further ado, let's get into practice test 2 for the Florida Civic Literacy Exam and the Civics EOC. All right, everyone, so let's get into practice test 2 for the FCLE and the Civics EOC. So which amendment abolished slavery in the United States? So the Civil War amendments are 3 separate amendments inside of the U.S. Constitution that have to do with slavery, the abolishment of slavery, and extending rights to African Americans specifically after the Civil War, right? Those amendments are the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th, okay? So some of these amendments have to do with voting rights, some of them have to do with citizenship rights, and one specific amendment has to do with the abolishment of slavery, and that answer is A, all right? The 13th Amendment is the amendment in the U.S. Constitution that abolished slavery. 12. What is federalism? Now, this is a vocabulary question. Everybody who has taken a civics class needs to understand the concept of federalism. So here are your answer choices. A monarchy that delegates authority to regions, a government system sharing power between national and state levels, a system where all power is concentrated at the federal level, and a type of government led by a single dictator. Now, I don't want you to get confused here because the word federalism, right? Yes, it has the root word federal in there, which means a national or a central government, but don't get confused here, okay? The system of federalism in the United States is the division and the sharing of power between a national government and state governments, all right? That is the system that we have in the United States, and the answer here is B. A government system sharing power between national and state levels. Now, you as a citizen of the United States have to follow state law, but you also have to follow federal law simultaneously. That is a really good example of federalism in real life. "13. What is the primary purpose of due process? A says to ensure fair treatment in legal proceedings. B is to speed up court cases. C is to increase the power of law enforcement. And D is to eliminate jury trials." Now, a couple of these answer choices are actually kind of anti-democratic. If you know anything from your civic studies, is that the United States is a republic, right? So a representative democracy. So eliminating jury trials and increasing the power of law enforcement kind of cut against that idea. So you guys are left with 2 answer choices here. A is to ensure fair treatment in legal proceedings, and B is to speed up court cases, all right? Now, inherently, you don't necessarily want to speed up court cases. You want the judicial system to kind of work itself out in a timely manner, but nothing too fast where details could be missed. And due process specifically is the vocabulary word that we assign to ensuring fair treatment in legal proceedings. All right? So the answer here is going to be A. Hey everyone, just wanted to stop by quickly to remind you that all of the resources that you need to succeed on the Florida Civic Literacy Exam and the Civics EOC are available on my Teachers Pay Teachers site as well as my website. Please follow the link in the description in order to access these practice tests. Happy testing. 14. Why did the Founding Fathers favor a constitutional republic over a pure democracy? So A is to ensure faster decision-making, B is to maintain stronger state governments, C is to eliminate the need for elective representatives, and D is to prevent tyranny of the majority and protect minority rights. So in a pure democracy, right, this is out of 100 people, if you get 51 votes, right, whatever the 51 want is going to go into law. Now, what the founders thought about deeply and pretty impressively is that there is this concept of the tyranny of the majority, meaning that if 51% favor one thing, right, 49%, that's still an incredibly large chunk, do not favor it. So to prevent the slightest majority from having control over the slightest minority, right, D is going to be the correct answer here. So what a republic does is it requires things like supermajorities or 2/3 votes. And again, that is going to be a bigger percentage than just 51% on a specific vote. So to prevent that 51% from taking advantage of the 49, the Founding Fathers kind of thought about creating a republic over a pure democracy. The answer here is D. So 15, which case overturned the separate but equal doctrine? So we should know a bunch of our landmark Supreme Court cases, specifically Plessy versus Ferguson, which establishes separate but equal. So what separate but equal says is that you are allowed to segregate based on race in the United States as long as the facilities are equal. Now, I don't know if you've been to 2 or more McDonald's in your life, but inherently when you separate things, they become unequal, right? There's a specific court case that overturned Plessy versus Ferguson, and this is going to be Brown versus the Board of Education, all right? So Brown v. Board of Ed overturns the separate but equal doctrine and integrates public schools. Marbury versus Madison, we spoke about in the other test, which is judicial review. Korematsu versus U.S. is about Japanese internment during World War II. So the answer to number 15 is A. Brown v. Board of Ed is the one that overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. So 16, what was the significance of the Northwest Ordinances? Right? A is they resolved disputes over state borders. B, they established guidelines for expanding U.S. territory. C, they outlawed all forms of slavery. And D, they promoted industrial development in the South. All right? So take a look at D. All right? D says they promoted industrial development in the South. Well, what is the ordinance called? It's called the Northwest Ordinance, right? So do we think this has anything to do with the South? No, right? So D is definitely not going to be the answer here. They outlawed all forms of slavery, maybe. They established guidelines for expanding U.S. territories, maybe. They resolved disputes over state borders. So one of the successes under the Articles of Confederation is actually this Northwest Ordinance. And what this ordinance does is it expands or gives guidelines for the expanding U.S. territory. All right? So we had a bunch of land over in like the Ohio, Michigan area that we needed to kind of figure out how to basically expand into and govern. So the Northwest Ordinance was crucial in that regard. Okay, let's take a look at 17. What does the Supremacy Clause state? All right, so A says federal laws and treaties are the supreme law of the land. States have the final authority in legal disputes. Congress cannot override the Supreme Court, and the president's decisions are always final. All right, so supremacy, you have to think supreme. Which laws are above those other laws? All right, so if you think of the U.S. government and state governments as a triangle. On the bottom ring, you'll have your local governments. In the center, you'll have your state governments. At the top, you'll have federal. And above that, you would have the U.S. Constitution. So if you take a look at 17, the best answer is A, okay? Federal laws and treaties are the supreme law of the land, meaning if you are a state government, you cannot go against federal law. If you are a local government, you cannot go against federal law either, all right? So 17 states that federal laws are above state laws, which are above local laws. And the Constitution is above them all. 18, what does the Elastic Clause allow Congress to do? You have a couple of powers that Congress has. So one, you have express powers, but you also have implied powers. So let's take a look at the answer choices here. A says overrule the Supreme Court. B says grant executive orders to the president. C, make laws necessary to carry out its enumerated powers. And D, limit individual rights during wartime. So A doesn't allow, that doesn't exist, right? Congress can't overrule the Supreme Court. That's not really how that works. What they can do is decide to not allow a Supreme Court justice to be accepted to the position in a Senate hearing. That's allowed, right? That's a check on the court, but they can't overrule a Supreme Court ruling. B says to grant executive orders to the president. Now, the president is the only person that can grant executive orders, so B is not going to be correct. So you have C and D. Limit individual rights during wartime. Maybe, okay. Make laws necessary to carry out its enumerated powers. Yes, okay. So the answer here is C. So enumerated powers are the same thing as expressed powers. If you were to go into the Constitution today and open it up to Article 1, which is the legislative branch, you guys could actually read the enumerated powers that Congress has, all right? What the Elastic Clause does is you need to think about a rubber band, right? What does a rubber band do? It stretches, okay? The elastic in your waistband of your shorts, what does it do? It stretches, all right? So Elastic Clause and implied powers allow Congress to do what is necessary to carry out its enumerated powers, right? Or its express powers. This is also known as the necessary and proper clause, all right? So the example that I like to give my class is the following, right? Inside of the U.S. Constitution, there is no mention of aircraft carriers and rocket launchers whatsoever, right? But it's implied that the U.S. government can develop those technologies to carry out its express power of raising an army, right? So if you want to have an effective army, you're going to need technologies such as aircraft carriers and rocket launchers. Although it's not expressly written, right, or enumerated in the Constitution, it's implied that in order to carry out that power, you're going to need those technologies. So 18 is C. 19, what principle is highlighted by the phrase, we the people in the U.S. Constitution? A is popular sovereignty, B is federalism, C is checks and balances, and D is judicial independence. So we the people, right? I want you to focus on the word people. People, popular, okay? Population. So the answer here is popular sovereignty. This is a vocab word that you all need to know. I can almost guarantee you this will be on both the FCLE and the Civics EOC. So understand the idea of popular sovereignty. The power comes from the people. The phrase we the people in the U.S. Constitution obviously highlights that as well. And 20, what is the primary focus of checks and balances? All right. So is it A, giving Congress absolute control over the judiciary? B, ensuring states retain more power than the federal government? C, guaranteeing the president's decisions are final? And D, preventing one branch of the government from becoming too powerful? This one should be a layup for all of you. You guys should always get this one correct. We're talking about checks and balances, right? So A is inherently wrong because if we're talking about checks and balances, obviously we're not trying to give absolute control to Congress, right? So A is incorrect. B, ensuring states retain more power than the federal government. We just spoke about federalism. I don't think B is the correct answer either. C says guaranteeing the president's decisions are final. Again, that would be actually a violation of checks and balances because we know Congress has the power to override a presidential veto, right? So that would be an example of a decision not being final. So the answer here is D, all right? Checks and balances prevent one branch of the U.S. government from becoming too powerful. All right, so that was practice test 2 for the FCLE and the Civics EOC. If you want to take a look at all of our practice tests, please visit the link in the description to our website and also my TPT page. We've helped thousands of students over the last 3 years accomplish their goals of passing both of these exams. If you have any questions, reach out to me at govdogs@gmail.com and I'll do my best to get back to you. Happy testing.